He is one. Nobody's gonna argue with Burrow. He's been to a Super Bowl too. I am putting Aaron Rodgers much higher when he had him 8th or whatever they had him. I'm putting him 3rd. I'm gonna bet on his money. I'm gonna put my money on him. I'm gonna bet on his guts. He's gonna bounce back off that Achilles. I think Rodgers is still the 3rd best quarterback in football. I'll drop Allen 1 spot to 4. Stafford. Anybody who saw that Detroit game last year and what he did in that field, and he's won a Super Bowl, not even an issue, he's 5. I'm going to put Hurts 6 because he would have been the Super Bowl MVP if they maybe didn't make a call on that defensive holding, and I still believe in him. Jackson never wins in the playoffs. He's been bad in the playoffs. I could even put him lower than this if I wanted to. I don't want to hear about Lamar Jackson in the playoffs. I'm tired of it. I mean, Buffalo last year against Kansas City was awful. He's 7. Goff has been to a Super Bowl and played great last year in the postseason. I can move him up if I wanted to. I love Stroud, so maybe it's only 1 year. I'm a little too quick with him. And I'm going to put Herbert 10 because I'm taking Herbert over Dak Prescott. And I would take Cousins over Prescott, too. That is my list. I mean, you want to argue with a couple of the placements? I don't know how you can argue with the top 10. Go ahead. Fight me off.
Well, Mad Dog, a couple things. First of all, I'm Southern American, so my name is Booger, not Booger. I'm not French, although I'm going there at some point. It's okay. It's okay. I know you're from upstate New York, and you have no clue where Louisiana is, so I'll educate you. No problem. That's where I'm from. That's number 1. Number 2, you talk about putting Aaron Rodgers higher on the list. I don't think Aaron Rodgers should be in the top 10 based on where we are. He's going into his 40-year-old season. It's about what have you done for me lately. He played 4 snaps last year. I think he should be off the list, and Tua Tagovailoa should be on the list. Tua Tagovailoa was top 10 in QBR last year, 4,600 yards. He's maybe the most accurate quarterback in football based on what he does and how efficiently he runs that offense. So while we're trying to live in the past, as you love to do with Bob Cousy and Larry Bird and Dennis Johnson and all the names that you throw out on this program every week, let's live in the present and go forward. And if we're talking about the 2024 season, how can you honestly say that Aaron Rodgers should be 3?
Well,
3? Of all numbers, 3? You just want to disrespect Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow just off the top? So I'm going to disagree with you there. I think Tua should be on this list. I think Dak Prescott should be higher. And until Aaron Rodgers shows me that he can regain some of what he had a couple years ago, let's stop living in the past, remembering how things used to be. I used to have hair 10 years ago. Now I don't. I look better, but I still don't have hair. So let's live in the present and go forward, Mr. Mad Dog.
Okay, so Rodgers. All right, Danny, I'll fight him off in a sec. Dan, you're next. Go ahead. Let me hear.
All right, first of all, Boog, just so you know, I forgot to tell you this before. I on EA Sports College Football back yesterday, I picked UConn. I blew the doors off LSU. So I wanted to make sure that I got that to you today before. It's so good to have the game back. For the overall list, the executive list, okay? I don't have a ton of issues with the executive list. I think you can make the gripe that Kirk Cousins has to be on there before he got hurt. He's on track for about 40 touchdowns and 10 picks. You can make the case that Brock Purdy should be up there. Brock Purdy may never get up there because people are stupid, but I think Brock Purdy has a case to be up there. So the overall top 10 list that the execs made, I don't have a ton of issues with. Mad Dog, I love you. You're out of your freaking mind.
On who?
If you are coming off of last season and you're putting Lamar behind Jalen Hurts.
Oh, come on.
You're out of your mind.
Have you
won the MVP.
Have you seen Lamar play in a playoff game? He stinks. He's done nothing in the postseason. Have you seen Hurts?
Sir.
Hurts would have been a Super Bowl MVP if he didn't. He scored 35 points against the Chiefs. Lamar couldn't score 2 touchdowns against the Chiefs.
And if Zay Flowers, as much as I am a fan of the young man, doesn't fumble on the 1-yard line, Baltimore has a chance to win that game.
And how did Lamar play? How did Lamar play in the game? How many interceptions he throw? How did Lamar play in the game?
They did not win that. Mad Dog, they did not lose that game last year because of Lamar. They lost that game last year because they ran the ball 6 times.
He didn't play.
Bug, why did Baltimore lose that game last year?
Oh, come on.
Maybe the worst game plan I've ever seen by offensive coordinator Todd Monken. I agree with Dan on that. But, Dan, you also have to admit Dan, that even when they put it on Lamar didn't perform. Now I think Lamar should be higher on the list, but if we're just talking about that particular game, Mad Dog has a point about Lamar in the postseason. What have you done for me lately? As talented as he is, he doesn't have anything to show for it.
If Zay doesn't fumble that ball on the 1 yard line, the narrative of that game might be very different, let alone the result. I'm not saying Lamar lit it up, but you can't come off of last season. And Mad Dog, coming off of 2023, you have Rodgers at 3.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit of a stretch, even though he's an all-timer type of thing. And Jalen had 20 turnovers. He was the worst quarterback against the blitz. We've seen one great season from Jalen and one not great season from Jalen. To put him over Lamar, that has never had a bad season, it feels like, in the NFL, I can't do that.
Well,
Okay, so I want to talk about this because we're kind of talking about a few different things. We're talking about the list. We're talking about how Orlovsky is very angry about the whole Lamar thing. So I want to go back and look at Mad Dog, which is just a weird thing, but his top 10, and then I want to kind of go to what Orlovsky had to say about it all. I don't want to get too lost in the weeds of comparing these lists back and forth. What do you think about Mad Dog's list? Because who cares? And then relative to the executives list, it's just, we're just talking about lists. But the thing that I did want to kind of discuss loosely is that this list obviously has Jalen Hurts, where the other one doesn't. Lamar Jackson is, near the bottom essentially, and Aaron Rodgers is skyrocketed to the top, which I do find all thought-provoking. When I released the last video talking about the top 10 list, one of the most common comments that I saw actually was, more than anything, was the anger that Justin Herbert was there. Actually, I saw more people kind of complain about Justin Herbert more than, say, even like an Aaron Rodgers being up there. There was still kind of that questioning of like, should Aaron be there, because a lot of people think that Aaron's just no longer good. There was a discussion that Jordan Love should be there. Brock Purdy. I had never heard anyone say Kirk Cousins yet. As we heard, Orlovsky brought up Kirk Cousins, which I think is a fair point. I think the reality is that there's just actually, for the first time in a really long time, we just have a bigger bag of top level quarterbacks, of more than competent quarterbacks. I've said this the other day, like, once upon a time, we had it felt like we had way more average and even bad quarterbacks than great. We used to talk about how it was like the quarterbacks were either absolutely elite, right? It was either Tom Brady or Peyton Manning, or it was like, oh my God, who the heck is this guy? I don't even know this guy's name, right? It was like such a drop off. And I've been predicting that we're going to get more and more better quarterbacks over the years, and better offenses for that matter. And it kind of seems like we're probably practically already there at this point. Not to say that everybody is on Patrick Mahomes' level or Josh Allen's level, but the truth is that we have so many quarterbacks now that you should be happy to have them. And I said this yesterday, where it was like, we have quarterbacks where you either have to worry about them or you don't, right? It's either that's a quarterback that we have to really make sure we contain, otherwise he's going to rip us apart, or not. Or it's like, whatever, he's just a quarterback. And when you even just look at this list, even if you disagree with this list, you have to worry about Patrick Mahomes. You have to worry about Joe Burrow. You have to worry about Aaron Rodgers. I don't care how old he is. The guy can still light you up. Josh Allen, you have to worry about. Stafford, you have to worry about. Hurts, whether you think he only had one good year or not, you have to worry about him. We know what he's capable of doing. Lamar Jackson, you obviously have to worry about him. Jared Goff, he can also cut you to pieces. Give him time in the pocket, and he will shred your defense up. CJ Stroud, have to worry about it. Justin Herbert, I understand why people don't understand why Justin Herbert is here. I have been emphasizing this for a while now. He is elite. He is a textbook example as to why the situation matters. And we are going to see within the next couple of years with Harbaugh that he is going to be at the top. And it's indisputable to me. So again, no matter what list we want to use, because now here's the other list. It's kind of a little bit more harder to see. What are the other names up there? It seems like really the only difference is that Prescott's off it, and Hurts is there too. I don't think Prescott is a quarterback that you have to worry about necessarily. It's not to say that he's a bad quarterback. I think he's a good quarterback, but he's not great or elite, and his best game doesn't scare me. people can highlight to his best games, but they're against really bad teams. So it's like, that doesn't scare me. If I'm the 49ers, if I'm the Chiefs, if I'm the Bills, the Ravens, I'm not afraid of Dak Prescott. Sure, if I'm the Panthers, I'm afraid of Dak Prescott. So again, I think that's where that list now comes to me. Am I afraid of Jordan Love? Yeah, I could be afraid of Jordan Love. I have to worry about Jordan Love. Am I afraid of Tua? I don't know. It maybe probably depends more on the team. And then that also then kind of brings you to Brock Purdy. It's like, am I afraid of Brock Purdy? I think Brock Purdy at this point would be in a similar category of, say, a Jared Goff, where it's like, yeah, give him the time, give him the offense, and he will pick you apart. He will execute that offense absolutely flawlessly. Now, do you maybe need to game plan specifically against Brock Purdy in a way where he would just be able to destroy you? Probably not. I think you probably have to look at the offense more as a whole. I think sometimes when you're defense and you're game planning against another team, sometimes it is very quarterback centric, right? It's like, we have to contain this quarterback at all costs because he can just kill us in so many different ways. But with someone maybe like a Purdy, and again, I praise Purdy. I think Purdy's hate is way overblown, or shouldn't, he gets way too much hate. But like I've said the other day, I think what makes Purdy most special is his ability to execute an offense that people act like it's so easy, and it's just not true. Because otherwise, backup quarterbacks would be able to thrive all the time, and they do not. So I think Brock Purdy is an incredibly high-level quarterback in that regard. But individually, I don't see that maybe he's necessarily someone that you have to like go all in on, saying we have to contain Purdy, otherwise we have no chance of winning this game. If you can't contain Joe Burrow, if you can't contain Josh Allen, if you can't contain Mahomes, you're losing. There's no way around it. You're just gonna lose. And that's where Lamar Jackson is in that category as well. So yeah, it's just interesting, honestly. These lists, people obviously take such issues with, and Orlovsky is so heated about Lamar Jackson, and I want to address that now. It will be my last point. I get the issues with Lamar, and why people are concerned, and it's like, the truth is, though, is because this is what someone said in the comments, where they said, so Lamar gets all the praise for when he wins the MVPs and when he does good during the regular season, but then he gets none of the blame during the for his playoff losses. And I think it's a valid point, or a valid question to ask. And as you guys know, I said this the other day as well, when RG3 was trying to act like Lamar Jackson gets he gets held to a different standard, which I just totally rip apart, because we can even see now two people like Orlovsky and Booger defending Lamar Jackson in that regard. Booger a little bit less so, but still defending him nonetheless, ultimately blaming the game plan, and so that was probably the worst game plan he's ever seen for the Ravens versus the Chiefs. I agree with that. I think a couple things can be true. I think Lamar Jackson needs to play better, but also that the Ravens have failed him, especially in the playoffs. Why some teams and some players play better in the regular season versus the playoffs, we automatically assume that it's because they can't handle the moment, or that they choke, or that they can't, that's what we always say, oh, they could do during the regular season, but not the playoffs. And we hold the playoffs on this higher level, right? Understandably so. But one of the biggest reasons why those players or teams don't do as well in the playoffs, because one, they're playing better teams at that point, right? They're playing the playoff teams. And two, they're most like, a lot of times they're being outcoached. They're being outplayed by the other team or the other coach. So that now makes the other team, the losing team, look worse than they would maybe therefore be. And that's what you kind of see. That's what we've seen a lot with the Ravens, is that they get out coached, they get out game planned, which now does not set up their players like a Lamar Jackson to succeed. The number one job of a coach is to put your players in a position to succeed. I always try to think of, like, is that officially, I want to try to reduce it down. What ultimately is the number one job of a coach, if we could reduce it down? And I really think that's what it is. At the end of the day, are you putting your players in the best possible position to succeed? And I do not think the Ravens do that for Lamar Jackson. I just don't. And I think because Lamar Jackson can do so much on the football field, I think he is more sensitive to a game plan and coaching than a lot of these other coaches, than a lot of these other quarterbacks. I think that at the end of the day, he is more at the mercy of his game plan, almost to a degree of potentially like a Brock Purdy, actually, right? Like he is more at the mercy of what is the game plan, how are we going to attack this defense. But the difference is that Lamar Jackson has way more tools in the toolbox, say, of Brock Purdy. So we put all that blame on Lamar to be like, Lamar, you should be able to figure it out. Look at everything you can do. But not every great quarterback or great athlete has the ability to figure it out. That may not be Lamar Jackson's strong suit. And that is now where, say, a Mahomes or even a Josh Allen can separate himself from a Lamar Jackson. Because they might just have a higher football IQ at that point. And that's not such a negative thing to say. It's not an insulting thing. I think we sometimes take that as like such an inherently negative thing. Or saying, are you saying that he's dumb? That's not at all what I'm saying. That is not at all what I'm saying. Everybody has different levels of skill sets. Okay? I mean, they all have different variations of what they can and can't do. I don't think Goff is great at necessarily figuring it out either. Right? So it's like he is also more at the mercy of his game plan. Same thing again, like I said earlier, with Brock Purdy. And yet we don't see that as like so inherently insulting. But we do with these like hyper athletic quarterbacks that if you don't say, listen, I don't know if they have the best chances at figuring something out in the middle of a game, they automatically find it very insulting. And I understand why stereotypically in the past that was a big issue. I totally am sensitive to that and understand that. But I think we've evolved past that. Okay. I really, really do, because we know Mahomes is absolutely brilliant. We know lots of quarterbacks are brilliant in that regard. So I don't want to like get bogged down by some of the things that people could, say are insensitive or whatever. But I do think that is probably one of the issues that Lamar Jackson faces, that he is such a freak athlete and a brilliant football player, brilliant quarterback, one of my favorite quarterbacks to watch play, but I think he is at the mercy of his game plan. He just is. And you could even blame, if you wanted to, outside of some of the random injuries and the random moments in the Super Bowl, you could blame that Shanahan did not set Brock Purdy and that offense up to succeed at best. You could say, like, what were you doing? What were some of those game plans? What were you do? What calls were you calling in the second half? And Colin Cowherd has talked about it, where he's like, he believes that Shanahan is too much at the mercy of his own call sheet, that he doesn't, his play sheet, that he doesn't adapt to a game, which then leads like a Brock Purdy out to dry in that regard. And we see this with Josh Allen. Josh Allen tries to overcome the game plan a lot, and it can be brutally difficult. Sometimes he can, sometimes he can't. He's lucky because he is an absolute physical freak that he can kind of barrel over it. Lamar Jackson ends up being a little bit more of a finesse runner, and so I think it also, even some of his running is still kind of a little bit at the mercy of not necessarily the game plan, but just the game as a whole and how it's unfolding, where someone who is as big as Josh Allen, he can just literally put his head down and just barrel through linemen like he's like a cartoon running back. So yeah, it's all interesting, honestly, why we can pick and choose where we think a quarterback will be, what we think their strengths and weaknesses are. It just seems like everyone always gets so sensitive about a quarterback. And kind of why we say one is better than the other, or why we say one is, lacking in something. And I really think part of, because some people kind of want to call me out for what I said about Lamar Jackson, I think the fact of his lack of playoff success, that kind of, proves my point of what I'm saying, that he does not have the same level of ability to kind of figure it out in the middle of the game, that he might not have. That might not just be one of his talents. It might not be one of his skill sets, like, say, a Mahomes. And so, again, he is more at the mercy of the game plan and the in-game adjustments that his team and his coaching staff fail him. So, again, to be very clear, I put the blame not on Lamar Jackson, because I don't expect everyone to have ultra high IQ like that. I don't expect, we always talk about someone like a LeBron James being ultra high IQ. I don't expect everyone to have that ability. We have and the same thing now, that's what they say about Jokic these days as well, that these are just such high level IQ players. Not every player will have the ability to be that much of a super genius on the court or on the field. That's just a fact. I mean, as good as I'm trying to think of another like great player, Dwayne Wade, right, who played with LeBron James, both brilliant players, both intelligent, LeBron's IQ was superior. His football IQ and instincts was superior to Dwayne Wade. And it's not to say Dwayne Wade was bad. It's just that is what is able to separate the next level, right? To get to the next level. And it, again, when I talk about also like kind of IQ we're figuring out, we're talking about inches, not feet, not yards, not miles. It's not like this player is so dumb, right? Brock Purdy's so dumb. Lamar Jackson's so dumb. They can't figure it out in the game. And Patrick Mahomes is just a super genius and he can. Josh Allen's a super genius and he can. It's not what I'm saying. It's just that next little edge is the difference between being able to win consistently in playoffs or lose consistently. Same thing with Andy Reid. Andy Reid is also high IQ, and that's why he's also able to kind of outcoach and figure stuff out. He always seems to be a step ahead, even of the other geniuses. Shanahan, McVay, whoever. So really interesting talk. Honestly, I think these conversations, when we kind of get beyond just the general top 10 and where a player should be, and we actually kind of drill down and get lost in the weeds, to me, that's when it gets a little bit more interesting. Getting lost in the weeds rather than like, Aaron Rodgers should be 3, not 8. It's like, okay, sure. Like, does it really matter at that point? It's just, I just think it's more interesting to kind of talk about these quarterbacks as a whole and kind of how they relate to everyone else and not get bogged down by, 3 versus 8, 5 versus 9, 10 versus 12. It's just at that point, it really doesn't matter to me. But those are just my thoughts. I would absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think? Do you have any issues with either of the top 10 quarterbacks or anything that Orlovsky was talking about, Mad Dog or Booger? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions, let's get in some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I would absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much, and see you next time.